In this module, I want to give you some tips for actually choosing your product. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of actually exactly how to use the tools to find a product, these are just a few more things that you need to be thinking about. I just want to remind you what I said in an earlier module about the 2.5x rule that I have. So that means if you have $5,000 to start on Amazon, you need to find a product that actually is not going to cost you more than $2,000 landed. So when you're looking for products, you have to keep that in mind. So you may actually find some really great things, but you don't have the budget to actually launch that product. So you got to keep that in mind and don't make that mistake. Now there's 7 basic steps actually to actually getting a product launched on Amazon. The first one is you got to find the product, of course, but then you got to make sure and verify that there's demand on Amazon for that product. You got to make sure that there's keyword demand for that product. You've also got to take a look at the competition and make sure that it's not too competitive and that you actually think that you can compete. Then you've got to actually find a manufacturer that can make this product for you at a profitable price. That's super important. Then you have to decide, are you going to do any kind of custom packaging for it? Are you going to make it different in some way? You've got to get a UPC code. You've got to have a logo or package design done. The next thing you got to do is actually place the order for the product and do with all the specifications of how many you want and what special modifications you want and how it's going to be packaged in the whole 9 yards. The next thing you got to do is create your listing on Amazon. You got to get the listing created with all the keywords, with all your photos, with any video, with your A+ content, with all that kind of stuff. You can do that while you're waiting for the product to be manufactured and shipped. Or maybe you have to wait until it's actually manufactured so you actually have the actual product if you didn't do samples so that you can actually take photos of it. But there's some really cool stuff that you can do with 3D rendering these days where once you have a sample of the product, even if it doesn't have your logo and the exact colors, there's companies like Fade Visuals that can actually take your product and make a 3D render of it and then change it to any color, put it in any scene. So you can do a lot of this stuff even before the final product is finished. The next thing you have to do after you get the listing created is once the product arrives and gets into Amazon, you're going to have to launch the product. You're going to be doing some PPC, something called search, find, buy to get the momentum going. We'll talk about all that a little bit later. And then you get paid, hopefully. You make some sales and you get paid, and then you just rinse and repeat and do it again. So there's basically 7 steps that you've got to do to actually get this product cycle going. And hopefully you'll get that going and be able to launch product after product after product and really grow your business. Now when you're looking for products, there's some things you should avoid and some things you should actually look for. So I want to go through a few tips of things that you should be cautious of and some things that actually present themselves as pretty good opportunities when you're looking for products. The first thing you want to do is examine the competition. You want to see what the competition is selling, and is there a way that you can actually differentiate the product from the competition, or can you compete with that competition? Maybe there's only one other person selling this and they're dominating the market, and you can come in and take a piece of the action from them, take 20-30% of what they're doing and with a very similar product. Or maybe there's a lot of people competing and you've got to truly differentiate the product. So you've got to analyze the competition as well as how many reviews they have. And you'll see when we get into the product evaluation and the product checklist in just a little bit in another module, where you're going to take a look at how many reviews do these top competitors have. And some categories are going to be way too competitive for you to compete and try to get a leg in the door. And so you're going to have to avoid those. Another thing that you want to do is watch out for categories that are dominated by big brands. So if you do a search for some of the top keywords and they're dominated by big brands, it may be a little bit difficult for you to actually get in. Now Amazon themselves as a seller or one of Amazon's brands, I don't consider them as major competition. But if you're going to sell something in the sports and outdoor space and your keyword returns results that everything on the page is Nike, for example, that's going to be difficult. Or take hand sanitizer, for example. If you're a hand sanitizer brand, it's going to be difficult to compete against Purell or Germex because those are 2 big brands and they dominate the top 100 of the search results. They have like 70 of the top 100 search results. So it's going to be difficult for you to nudge in there. And so those are things that you want to avoid if at all possible. Another thing you want to do is you always want to try to compete against other private label sellers when possible. So, and you can tell a lot of times who's a private label seller and who's not just by the way they create their listing. You'll start to see, as you get into this, you'll start to see patterns of the way they organize their bullets or the way they organize their photos. They've taken a course and you can start to see patterns. So the more private label sellers there are versus big brands, or big corporations selling their products, that's a good thing. You want to avoid restricted items if at all possible when you first start. And restricted items are things that maybe have Bluetooth in them, because you're going to have special Bluetooth certifications and pay special fees to actually import those items into the US, or they have UL certifications, or maybe they require FDA approval or EPA approval. Those are things that it's okay to sell those, but when you're first starting, those are just extra barriers and extra humps that you got to get over that you might want to try to avoid. Anything that's hazmat or pesticide related is something to avoid too. And it's not just hazmat, it's not just chemicals. Some cosmetics, lipsticks and stuff are actually considered hazmat. So you got to be careful on some of those. I would recommend you stay away from those type of products. Medical devices and medical products are oftentimes difficult. Sexual wellness products can be difficult. Anything that's legal in one state but not in another state in the U.S., like CBD products, those are ones that you got to be careful with as well that could present problems. Another one is anything related to like a pandemic that just happened. Those type of problems can be very, very difficult, and there can be special rules implemented almost overnight on Amazon that can take you out of business really fast. So be careful with those type of products. Coming up later in this week, we actually have a module by a guest, Frederick, that actually is going to talk about compliance for products, and it's going to give you a lot of ideas of how to make sure that your products are in compliance. One thing is you can't trust manufacturers from outside the United States if they give you certificates for UL or FDA. A lot of times those things may be from some other company, or they may not actually be real. So be very leery if your manufacturer or your factory actually gives you these certificates. You're going to need to verify them, that they're actually real and they're valid in the United States. Otherwise, it might be for some other country. For example, when some people were selling hand sanitizer, they had an FDA certificate and it looked like official from the United States, but it's actually from the Indian version of the FDA. And that wouldn't fly in the United States, and the product got blocked at the border. So you got to make sure that everything is legitimate and real, and verify that. And that module on compliance will actually show you how to check that. So make sure you check out that module coming up later this week. Another thing you want to be careful of is when there's quite a few sellers from China that are selling the product. There's some plugins that you can get, and if you look down in the notes there, you'll actually probably see one of the plugins that does this. That will actually tell you how many sellers there are from different countries. They'll actually put little flags. They'll put American flags or Chinese flags or European flags actually on the listings, and it'll actually show you on the page exactly how many of these people are from which country. And what it does is it pulls the data. This plugin pulls the data from the seller back end, the seller information, and it shows you. And the reason you want to avoid if more than about 60 or 70% of the sellers are from China is because they have a price competitive advantage to you. They speak the language, they're local. Some of them will actually use some techniques and tactics that Western sellers might not be so comfortable doing. And so they have a big competitive advantage, especially on the price side. So I typically like to avoid those. If you can also tell a lot of times by the brand names. A lot of the brand names will be just a bunch of jumbo letters. And those are usually sellers from other countries that are just doing that for the trademark because they know that'll pass through the trademark when they just make up their brand name as NK3277G or whatever. Though that's a big warning sign as well when a lot of the sellers have something like that. Another thing you want to avoid are things that are fragile, like glass, or that have sharp edges, or some electrical devices, or like I said earlier, some things that are legal in some states but not in other states, like sexual items or CBD. Those are things that you're going to want to avoid when you're first starting out as well. You also want to avoid any products that are gated if possible. I mean, if you want to go through the process like we talked about of getting ungated, that's great and do that, but it might be easier for your first product if you choose something that's not in a gated category, and it'll be easier for you and less hassle to launch. Also, seasonal products are something that I would recommend that new beginners not sell. There can be great money and great opportunity in seasonal products, but because of the short window you have to sell them, if you're late getting to market, or if you don't quite get your launch done properly, you could actually miss the whole window and be stuck with everything until the next year. So I don't recommend seasonal products for beginners either. Another thing to watch out for are patent products. So make sure that you actually don't infringe on someone else's patents. We talked about that in an earlier module, and you can use Google Patents to check that. Or sometimes when you see a product and there's only one seller on it, and there's nobody else selling, and this one seller's been selling for 2 years and they're just crushing it, and you're like, why is there nobody else selling it? I'm going to enter this market and I can be the second place guy and I'll be happy. There's probably a patent on that. There's probably a reason. So be sure to check, make sure there's not a patent. You're not in violation of some sort of patent. Now remember, if there's a patent on it in another country and you're selling in the US, that doesn't apply. It has to be a patent in the country that you're selling in for them to actually be able to enforce it. They could block it from being shipped from another country, but it has to be in the country that you're selling in for it to be enforced. Another thing to actually watch out for are products with a lot of variations. I recommend that new sellers don't do things that have a bunch of different colors or a bunch of different sizes. Now you could enter something that has different colors, but just pick one color and do that one color and get that one going, and then later on launch the second or the third color. But don't try to do too many different variations initially. It's just going to complicate things and make it a little bit more difficult for you and spread your money a little bit too thin. Another thing to look for is where there's a lot of diversity in the pricing on the page. So if you type in the keyword and everybody is selling the exact same thing at a very similar price, it's going to be difficult for you to actually squeeze your way in. I prefer to see pages where the prices range greatly, where some items are for that keyword on page 1 are $20, other items are $40, other items are $100, because what that tells me is that there's an opportunity to come in at whatever level I want, whether that be at the cheaper price level, the medium price level, or the higher price level. So that's a good indicator of a good possible opportunity. Another thing to look for are a lot of newer products. So if you come into a marketplace and you see that this product, when you're looking at the X-ray tool, it'll actually show you in there, it'll actually show you the date that this product was first on Amazon. And products that have been on Amazon have been selling well for over 2 years. Usually you have a pretty dominant position. They're really strong in the algorithm on Amazon. It's actually much more difficult to compete with products that have been selling for many years on Amazon because they have such a strong grip on the algorithm. And usually they have a lot of reviews. So where there's a lot of products on page 1 that have been selling for less than 2 years, that's a good thing to look for and may present an opportunity for you. A couple other things you can look for are products that have poor packaging. Maybe you can compete by just putting the same thing or a very similar thing in a really nice package and blow them out of the water. Another thing I look for are listings that are subpar, that only have one image, or that the bullet points are really short and they're not very good. Helium 10 actually has a couple tools. One of them, if you have the Helium 10 extension installed, it'll actually show you on the page a little, on the Chrome browser, a rating of a 0 to 10 of how well they've got their listing. And Helium 10 also has a listing analyzer, which you can compare up to 5 different products against each other and see how the listings compare, and it'll give you a whole bunch of data. And Bradley will show you that in one of the demos he's doing later on. And you can see if you can compete based on creating a better listing. And one other thing that could be a potential great opportunity is items that you can't get locally. So things that are difficult to get locally for a lot of people could be a great opportunity as well. And that includes, it could be anything from food things like a barbecue sauce that's available only in Texas that the rest of the world knows about, but they can't get in their local stores. Things like that can be sometimes a really good opportunity on Amazon as well. Some other things to consider when you're looking at products are large and expensive items can be great opportunities because a lot of people tend to skip those because they're typically not best sellers. They only sell a few a day. They may cost a little bit more per unit to get into, but there can be some really good opportunities in the expensive and large items. Things that people are passionate about also are really good. Subject matters that they're passionate about are really good opportunities as well on Amazon to take a look at. Maybe if you can figure out a way to bundle things, maybe you see in a couple different items on Amazon that are selling well, and you're like, man, what if I put these two things together and made a couple little changes and put them in a cool packaging? That could be a great opportunity too. A lot of great opportunities are in sub-niches too. I mean, I'm just making this up, but a left-handed baseball bat for a red-headed person. That would be a sub-niche that there's not a lot of people looking for that, but you could dominate something crazy like that in selling 5 or 10 a day perhaps even. Look for things where you can add value, where you can make some sort of little small change and add value. And by adding value, I don't mean including a PDF or a downloadable book. That's not truly in today's world adding value. Something in regards to the product that adds value. It could be as simple as a really nice carrying case that everybody else is not including, or it could be including the batteries when other people aren't including the batteries, so people don't have to go hunt down the batteries. Little things like that that add value can be good. You've got to differentiate your product. And we're going to talk about that in one of the next modules about what truly is differentiation. You've got to differentiate today. You can't just be a me too and sell what everybody else is doing. Low competition products can be really, really good as well. Those typically don't sell as much, maybe a few units per day, but you can string together a few low competition products and you can do well. You could have 5 or 10 products that sell 5 units each a day and be making as much or more money as something that sells 20 or 30 units a day as a single product. So those type of things can be good, and especially a lot of those don't require as much of a search, find, buy when you launch, or as heavy PPC when you launch. So those can be great opportunities as well. Always be thinking outside the box. Don't just go with the flow. Always try to be original and think outside the box. It's okay to not be the best seller. It's okay to be the best alternative. There's nothing wrong with that. You have Hertz and car rentals, and then Avis is the best alternative. They both do very, very well. So don't think you have to be the best. Just know that you can be the best alternative and that you can compete. And you can find some really cool stuff to sell on Amazon. So these are just a few pointers that I want you to keep in mind as we go forward, as we start really digging into the numbers and into the weeds on actually finding great product opportunities on Amazon. We'll see you in the next module.